he definitely wants to be an engineer on this boat, doesn't he?
You gotta go up top first. Up there?
For 18 seasons, the FV Cornelia Marie was the beating blue heart of Deadliest Catch. With her iconic teal paint and Captain Phil Harris at the helm, she became the ultimate symbol of grit. Fans didn't just watch her battle 40-foot waves, they fell in love with her legacy. But today, the Cornelia Marie has vanished. She was erased by a force far more destructive than the Bering Sea, a shocking scandal that turned the beloved icon into a liability overnight. She survived the ice and the storms, but she couldn't survive the monster standing at her helm. FV Cornelia Marie was built in 1989 in Bayou La Batre, Alabama, commissioned by Ralph Collins and named after his wife Cornelia Marie Collins, a gesture of love that was welded into every bulkhead. She wasn't the biggest boat in the fleet and she wasn't the newest, but she had a spirit that captivated millions of viewers from the moment the cameras started rolling in 2005. She was painted a distinctive teal blue, a color that stood out against the gray misery of the winter ocean, like a beacon of hope. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was a statement. In a sea of rust-colored workhorses, the Cornelia Marie was unique, instantly recognizable on the horizon. Under the command of Captain Phil Harris, she became the undisputed star of the show. Phil treated the boat like a demanding mistress, cursing at her when the engine failed and caressing the wheel when she surfed down a massive swell. The audience fell in love with the dynamic between the man and the machine, seeing the Cornelia Marie as an extension of Phil's own rugged, chain-smoking persona. This connection created a deep emotional investment for the fans. When the engine broke down, we held our breath. When the crab pots came up full, we cheered. The boat became a home for the viewers, a familiar space where we watched boys grow into men and captains grow into legends. It was a sanctuary of blue-collar heroism, where hard work was the only currency that mattered. The wheelhouse was the throne room, and the galley was the confessional where the crew shared their fears and their dreams over cups of bitter coffee. The crew of the Cornelia Marie wasn't just a team. They were a band of brothers forged in freezing spray and 30-hour shifts. Men like Freddie Maugatai and Steve Ward weren't just employees. They were part of the boat's DNA. They knew every creak of the hull and every groan of the hydraulic system. They trusted the boat to bring them home, and the boat trusted them to keep her running. This symbiotic relationship was the magic of the show, a raw and unfiltered look at a life that most people can only imagine. But this intense attachment was also the origin of the vulnerability. By tying the boat's identity so closely to the Harris family, the producers created a situation where the fate of the vessel was inextricably linked to the behavior of its captains. If the Harris name was tarnished, the blue paint would be stained forever. The boat had survived hurricanes and ice storms, but it had no defense against the moral failings of the men who stood in its wheelhouse. It was a legacy built on a fault line, waiting for the tremor that would bring it all down. When Captain Phil Harris died in 2010, the Cornelia Marie entered a period of uncertainty that was as turbulent as any storm she had ever weathered. The death of the patriarch left a power vacuum that his sons, Josh and Jake, were ill-equipped to fill. We watched them struggle with grief and addiction, trying to step into boots that were far too big for them. The boat, once the queen of the fleet, began to look tired and neglected, mirroring the internal chaos of the family. For a while, the boat disappeared from the show. It was a ghost ship drifting in limbo, owned by investors who didn't care about the legacy and captained by hired guns who didn't love her like Phil did. Fans clamored for her return, launching petitions and social media campaigns, because Deadliest Catch didn't feel right without the blue boat. They missed the connection to Phil, and they wanted to see his sons succeed. They wanted the fairy tale ending where the sons reclaimed the kingdom. Then came the triumphant return. Josh Harris, having seemingly matured and partnered with Casey McManus, bought back the boat. It was the ultimate redemption arc. They poured money into a massive renovation, stripping her down to the steel and rebuilding her with state-of-the-art electronics and new engines. It was a financial gamble that required them to catch millions of pounds of crab just to break even, but it felt like destiny. They were betting the farm on the idea that the Harris legacy was strong enough to carry them through. Discovery Channel leaned hard into this narrative. They frame Josh as the prodigal son, returning to claim his kingdom. The Cornelia Marie was back in the opening credits, her blue hull smashing through the ice in glorious high definition. She was the centerpiece of the marketing, the symbol of the show's continuity and heart. Ratings spiked whenever the Harris brothers were on screen, proving that the legacy of Phil was still the most powerful engine on the boat. Josh and Casey were presented as the new generation, the odd couple, who bickered but got the job done. They expanded the brand, launching a spin-off show called Bloodline, where they used the boat's charts to explore fishing grounds in Hawaii. The empire was expanding, and the Cornelia Marie was the flagship of a growing fleet. It seemed like the Harris dynasty was secure for another 20 years. The renovation wasn't just about fixing steel, it was about fixing the family. It was a physical manifestation of their commitment to the future. But this success was a golden trap. The more the network invested in the Josh Harris narrative, the more vulnerable they became to his personal life. They had pinned the entire identity of the boat on a single man, ignoring the warning signs of his past. They were selling a hero's journey, but they hadn't vetted the hero. The boat was gleaming with fresh paint and new chrome, but the captain had a secret that was about to rot the hull from the inside out. The end of the Cornelia Marie didn't come with a bang or a sinking. It came with a quiet legal filing that made a noise loud enough to shatter a legacy. In August 2022, reports surfaced detailing heinous crimes committed by Josh Harris in 1998. The revelation that he had pleaded guilty to sexually abusing a minor was a nuclear event that destroyed his reputation instantly. The details were stomach-churning. Josh had been charged with fourth-degree assault and communicating with a minor for immoral purposes. While these charges were from his past, the resurgence of the information made them impossible to ignore. The image of the lovable, goofy captain was replaced by the mugshot of a sexual predator. The cognitive dissonance for fans was overwhelming. The man they had cheered for was a monster in disguise. It was a violation of the bond we thought we shared. We watched him mourn his father. We watched him struggle. We thought we knew his soul. To discover that the goofy, lovable Josh was actually capable of such darkness felt like a personal lie told to millions of people simultaneously. It turned the act of watching old episodes from a nostalgic comfort into a sickening experience. The network was faced with an impossible situation. Josh Harris wasn't just a cast member. He was the owner and the face of the Cornelia Marie. Every shot of the blue hull would now be a reminder of the abuse. Discovery Channel made a swift and brutal decision. They didn't just fire Josh, they erased him. And because the Cornelia Marie was his property and his stage, she had to go too. The footage of the boat was scrubbed from future episodes. The storylines involving the crew were abandoned mid-arc. The blue boat that had been a fixture for 18 seasons simply vanished into the fog of the editing room. It was a digital execution. This is the modern version of damnatio memoriae, the Roman practice of condemning a person's memory. By removing him from the digital archive, the network was attempting to purify the show, but in doing so, they had to sacrifice the boat. The Cornelia Marie became collateral damage in a PR war. This twist was devastating for the other people who relied on the boat for their livelihood. Captain Casey McManus, a talented fisherman who had nothing to do with Josh's crimes, was collateral damage. He lost his TV contract, his fame, and his primary source of income overnight because of his partner's sins. Imagine the silence on that dock. Casey didn't just lose a co-star. He lost his brother in arms to a lie. The specialized gear, the branded merchandise, the future contracts, millions of dollars in infrastructure instantly became worthless. The deckhands, men who worked the most dangerous job on Earth for a piece of the pie, were left standing in the cold with empty pockets. They were punished for loyalty, forced to pay the bill for a crime they didn't commit. It was a financial massacre that the cameras never showed. The entire microeconomy that revolved around the Cornelia Marie collapsed overnight. The tragedy is that the boat itself was innocent. She was just a collection of steel and wire, a tool that had served brave men for 30 years. But in the world of television, objects have meaning, and the Cornelia Marie had become a monument to a man who was now a pariah. She was tainted by association, radioactive to advertisers and executives who wanted to distance themselves as far as possible from the scandal. Today, the Cornelia Marie sits in a kind of purgatory. She is not destroyed. She is still a seaworthy vessel capable of catching crab. Recent reports suggest she is docked in Seattle or conducting tenders for other fisheries, working quietly in the shadows of the industry she once dominated. She has been stripped of her cameras and her producers, returning to the anonymous life of a working boat. But for the millions of people who loved her, she is dead. The ghost ship sails on in our memories, but we will likely never see her on Deadliest Catch again. The loss is profound because she represented a connection to the past, a link to the days of Phil Harris and the golden age of the show. She was the last tether to the original spirit of the series, before the spin-offs and the manufactured drama took over. Her disappearance marks the end of an era. The show has moved on, bringing in new boats and new captains like Linda Greenlaw, or bringing back old favorites like the Time Bandit to fill the gap. But none of them have the same emotional resonance as the Blue Boat. There is a hole in the fleet that cannot be patched. The chemistry of the show has changed, becoming colder and more corporate without the heart that Phil Harris built. The fate of the Cornelia Marie is a stark reminder of the politics of production. In reality TV, a character, even a mechanical one, is only valuable as long as it is profitable and safe. When the risk outweighs the reward, the asset is liquidated. The network protected its brand by sacrificing the boat, a cold calculation that left the fans mourning a machine. We are left with the sad realization that the legacy of Captain Phil has been dismantled by the sins of his son. It feels like a second death for the legendary captain. Phil Harris forced the cameras to keep rolling while he was dying, specifically to secure this future for his boys. He traded his final moments of privacy for their prosperity. To see that sacrifice squandered, to see the empire he built with smoke and blood burned down by his own heir, is a tragedy more painful than any storm the Bering Sea could conjure. The boat that Phil loved more than anything, the boat he died on, has been cast aside like a piece of drift junk. The Cornelia Marie didn't sink in the ocean. She sank in the court of public opinion. She was a victim of a crime she didn't commit, sentenced to obscurity because her captain failed to live up to the code of honor that the sea demands. The story of the Cornelia Marie is a modern tragedy about how the actions of one man can destroy the legacy of many. It teaches us that symbols are fragile things, easily tarnished and impossible to clean once the stain sets in. It reminds us that our heroes are flawed, and sometimes those flaws are fatal to the things we love. The boat was a character as rich and complex as any human on the show. She groaned in the storms, she bled rust, and she protected her crew. To see her erased is to lose a friend. The sound of her horn blasting through the fog was the sound of resilience, a defiance against the elements that inspired us all. While she may still be floating out there in the cold waters of the Pacific, the Cornelia Marie we knew is gone. She is a casualty of a war she didn't know she was fighting, a beautiful machine abandoned by the cameras that made her a star. What do you think about the erasure of the Cornelia Marie? Do you think the boat should be allowed to return under a different captain? Or is the stigma of Josh Harris too great to overcome? Let us know in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next deep dive into the hidden history of reality TV. Thanks for watching.